Good evening. It's 6 o'clock, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Water Commission of Garden Ridge to order for Tuesday, June 17th. No roll call. Everybody's here. Thank you. Appreciate your time. First, I'd like to welcome Hank Crippen. Hank is our city engineer representative from Tri-Hydro, and he'll be here, and Ryan Rapley, city manager, will be joining us at some point, I believe. And so if you would, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any citizens signed up tonight? Okay, thank you. Item 4, business items. Approval of the minutes for May 20th, Water Commission regular meeting. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes as provided in your packet, starting on the left? To the right, okay. May I get a motion to approve?
I move for approval of the minutes of the May 2025 Water Commission regular meeting as listed.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good evening, Ryan. Thank you for being here. Item B, discussions, report, updates. 1, the utility department monthly activity and comments. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the month of May, we pumped 21.5 acre feet out of the Edwards with a year-to-date of 79.66 with available 509.28. At that time, the Edwards was in stage 4. As of the 10th of May, or 10th of June, they dropped back down to stage 3 due to all the rainfall we had in the last 2 weeks. As of today, the J17 10-day average is 635.7, and the Comal Springs is 138 cubic feet per second for the 10-day average of both of those. But the daily average is quite impressive. J17 is actually at 640 today, and the Comal Springs is at 216 cubic feet per second. Trinity Well, we pumped 50.63 acre feet with a year-to-date total of 224.38. All distribution samples required by TCEQ passed. Water loss was 3.2%. Completed 322 ore quarters, 46 locates, no irrigation permits issued. Total portal customers was 912, up 8 from April. Meter daily readability percentage was 99.49% for 1,694 assigned meters. We had one leak at a fire hydrant, estimated about 50,000 gallons on teakwood. The seat needed to be replaced at the bottom of it, so it was just a little bit of an assembly kit that you need to do for that, and no new leak adjustments applied for or completed.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions? I have one, an increase of 8 from April using the portal. That's a big increase. That's probably the biggest incremental number that I can recall. Is there anything particular to that? I know there's been training, focus, just curious. It's great, it's good.
Nothing significant other than we've had a lot of move-ins, and so that could attribute to having a higher number.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, moving on, item 2, items applicable to the Water Commission from the June 4th City Council. These are the items that I picked up on, and if anyone from the city has anything to add to that, please let me know. The FM 2252 water line project is proceeding. It was on hold due to interference with other utilities, and that's cleared up, and you see these poles that are multiple braced and stuff. That's to allow the trench to go in next to those and the poles to still be in place. took a while, but it's ongoing. The Vista Ridge Water Line tie-in project is in the planning stage. The council discussed, and Robin presented a FY26 budget process, and it was discussed. And this is interesting, a resolution was passed forming the Quarry Advisory Council, and residents from Trophy Oaks, Regency Oaks, and Wildwind were, one each from those communities were named to that, those being HOAs or communities closest to the active quarries. There also will be representatives from the quarries and city management. I don't recall the exact head count and so on, so that process is continuing and moving on. Any questions on the water projects, I think we can probably cover in the next topic. I think that was the main items I could pick up on. Okay, item 3, updates related to water utility system, capital improvement plans in Vista Ridge pipeline connection. As requested by the commission, Ryan and Hank are going to update us for a little bit here on the status of these plans. And gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Go ahead. Yeah, we're good. Chairman Pohl and other commissioners, thank you for allowing us to be here. This is my first Water Commission meeting, so glad to be here. If you have any questions about my background experience, I'd be happy to answer those as well. What I've done so far, and been here for almost 90 days, has been working with Hank from Tri-Hydro. He's moved forward with the capital plan for water. It is my understanding the Water Commission has asked for that in the past. This will obviously identify existing future projects, prioritize those projects, and then provide a cost associated with items related to operations and water. So it's a big picture, it's the CIP, it's everything we need to account for when moving forward, especially when we're trying to determine a rate structure in the future. At this point, I'll turn it over to Hank, and he can give you sort of the scope of what he's tasked with, and then any other questions you might have related to any water projects.
Yeah, sure. So this scope is basically how it starts off as we go into water modeling. So we look at today's needs, we plug in future growth and go in 5-year increments. So we're going to look at 5 years from now, what are we looking at, 10 years, 15, 20, so to develop out a 20-year list, prioritized. It's going to be, chunked in 5-year increments, but really it's a prioritization list. And how does the growth, especially on the south end of the city, play into that as commercial growth might come in? So we'll be taking a look at that from the modeling standpoint and then developing the list from that modeling effort. The list itself will be analyzed with a future report that goes into a little more holistic for the city. So, for example, if there's a very large road reconstruction project and we know that there's a critical infrastructure, a water piece that's needed there, then we would lump those two together to make sure that the water goes first in the road, and we're not going back in and tearing up a brand new road. So we're looking at it holistically, but also really focusing down on water for the next 20 years. We were released on that a week ago, and we're putting a team together to get working on that. There are a couple of projects that I wanted to touch on that FM 2252, as Commissioner Pohl, is one that has kicked back up. They are slowly moving through it, but they are progressing on that one. We also have the approved budget amount allocated towards 2 projects, the SAWS Interconnect, which is referred to as the Vista Ridge. So they're one and the same project. It's a SAWS Interconnect is what we're looking for. We're looking to connect onto a 16-inch line extension that's going over to Schoenthal Ranch. That's what's being put in front of the SAWS board on July 1st for consideration. What's good about that connection is we originally budgeted for a crossing of FM 3009. If we get approved to go into that connection location, that saves on boring across the TxDOT road. So there's some cost savings with that. So there will be more to come on that. We hope that everything goes smoothly. SAWS has not asked for anything further from us, so that's usually a good sign. So that's one of the projects. The other project that we're working on right now is the ground storage tank behind the city hall here, the municipal ground storage tank rehab. We are close to having those ready for your Stevens review, actually, and that's planned to go into the rehab work. Will plan to go into work during cold season, so basically around beginning of November. is what we're hoping to do for that. So that's kind of the immediate projects. Back to the 20-year look ahead, you know, we do have some things that we're going to look into for the next 20 years, but we do have some immediate needs that we've identified over the next few years. You know, there's valve improvements across the city, and Stephen could definitely talk a little more in depth than I can about those, but they're identifying some issues with existing valves that we have. So there will be a holistic look at how can we improve the resiliency of the system that we have. There's another tank rehab. We have 2 bolted tanks, one behind the city and one on FM 2252 well site. They are getting to the end of their life, and we're looking to rehab them, get them along until we can figure out what we want to do from a budget standpoint in the future, several years from now, basically 7 or 8 years, basically what we're looking at to get those along. I do know there's a generator that we're looking to upgrade up to a 500 kilowatt. So there's a cost that's going to be looked at sooner than later to get that upgrade. And then we'll just be taking a look at some really aging water line in town. I know that some are getting pretty close to 50 years now. So those are going to be some places that we look at. I believe Fairview Circle is one of those that we were discussing offline. So we're going to take a closer look at that through the Water Master Plan and come up with a more immediate list as well as the 20-year.
Ryan?
I think Hank covered it all. Just to give you the bigger picture, my goal is developing a comprehensive capital plan for the entire city. So like Hank alluded to, there's going to be a section related to water, streets, city facilities, and other future capital projects sort of rolled into one document that the city can plan forward, not only in water, but with our general fund and future projects as well, and how to fund those as well, tying that to potentially future reserves to pay for those, hopefully without borrowing money. At some point, you may have to borrow money. It's just part of doing capital projects in that case. Right now, I've tasked Hank with moving forward with having a company come in and score and rank all of our streets. That's going to give us a 0 to 100 of what our condition is on those streets. And that's how we plan to do maintenance, rehab work to any street in Garden Ridge. But again, as Hank said, we want to be able to do the water lines first that are aging, and then we come in and it's coordinated to do the street the following year. So that's why I call it sort of a comprehensive capital and project that has all of those categories. So it's just a better planning tool for the city as a whole. And my goal is hopefully within the next 6 months to have that finally complete. Like I said, Hank is tasked with the water side. We will be involving possibly other engineers to help out other sections. As Hank knows, you try to divide and conquer on something like this to get a complete plan in place quicker, and to do two projects quicker as well, because you're going to have to come up, design, bid, and construct at some point. So you want to make sure that we're not getting behind on any of those projects as well. So, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question for Hank. So last month we had a great presentation from that rainwater collection company. So is that something that the city is looking into, of creating or constructing some type of rainwater collection system for one of our sites? Is that in that plan at all?
That's something I haven't been tasked to do at this time, but nothing's off the table as far as a 20-year plan. We can take a look into other options if that's what we're tasked to do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something we can put on the radar. I'm a big believer in borrowing what other cities are doing. So if there's some city doing that well, we sort of just need to emulate if that's possible.
Cool. Thanks.
Question. Do I have? Go ahead.
Is there, with what you see on the media, the growth of communities, is there a milestone for, multiple developments might come in here that might tax our water supplies? Are you factoring something in place where you get to the point where we can't handle too many more communities? Otherwise, it's going to
be too much of a strain on our infrastructure.
Go ahead, Hank.
See if this thing's on. There we are. Yeah, so we, currently, what we have from from the Edwards and from Trinity, we're doing fine. And then there is the potential of, right now, we're only looking into an emergency interconnect with SAWS. That is just emergency. However, as they loop their system that is stretching north of the city, and they get that fully looped, they have some capital projects planned, they need some development to come in and help fund those projects. They did say that they were open to having those conversations once that is looped. So there is, we're getting our foot in the door for those future conversations to have a third connection point, a third water source. But as of right now, I mean, it's tough to say during drought how much availability we have, but Stevens pumping 600,000 gallons a day max. I mean, it's
10-day average right now is about 600,000.
so from that rate, we're not looking to run out of water, anytime this year, and it's something that Steven tracks very diligently. So if we had a very large development in that came and said, hey, we need X amount of water for whatever reason, that's something we would definitely plug into this master plan. But we're not at a critical level of, hey, there's no more development at this time from a water standpoint.
And I don't know, Hank, if you want to elaborate on the Vista Ridge, that the option that we're going with, this will be presented to SAWS next month at their board meeting.
Correct. July 1st, 9:30 a.m. I'm not entirely sure the time. So that, I believe it goes through 2 rounds of the board. One will be for individual and then a consent agenda afterwards. But it would be discussed at that July 1st board meeting.
Can I jump in? Sure. Okay, I have maybe just a pet peeve on the letter that was written to the commission for, excuse me, preparation for the meeting and talking about rate increases. One thing that,
Excuse me, we'll have to wait and cover that
okay,
later. I mean, they are related, and I'm going to move it up next in the agenda. So I don't mean to interrupt you, but we have to follow that
I'm good.
point, but that's okay.
Yeah, Commission, the goal with Hank being here is try to give you an idea of what's sort of in the pipeline from that standpoint. So.
I might tie the two together because we can't avoid the fact we're going to be talking about a recommendation on a rate increase is the question of this increase and what we know so far. We're going to be asking how that it matches up. I understand looking 3, 5, even longer down the road is not within the scope of the 2026 budget, but I think one question is there anything from a capital expenditure or even a high maintenance item that we need to be aware of before we consider a recommendation on a rate increase? I mean, we all read the letter. We all know that it sounds like there's some anticipation. I don't know if there's any appropriate discussion on that at this point.
You just want a brief summary of some of the things that are coming up that?
Well, I think that, and I may be having throttled Richard here, it really, the question is there's maintenance items. We know there's valve replacements, there's things like that coming up. This is beyond the tank renovation and stuff, is that what you're submitting is your best anticipation of our expense profile. Let's look out the next 12 to 24 months because this rate increase is going to be effective during that period. So
There's a lot of valves that need to be replaced and manpower that puts those valves in the ground. Valves aren't really cheap. You're looking at 8-inch valves. We have some SCADA computers that need to be updated because they're like 3 or 4 years old and they need to be updated to the newest software and everything. That's another $1,200. What else? But then just general maintenance of keeping everything going, chlorine, electric, reagents to make sure that the chlorine's in the water. all that?
I think I might hold off until we actually get to the resolution to ask a couple questions there. One thing I did want to add, the pipe route itself is in the last city council meeting agenda package. And it shows the routing and the avoidance of crossing 3009. So if any of you are curious, you can go back to the last city council meeting, go into that agenda package, you can pull that map up and it shows you. And it looks like a slick solution if everything continues to work. On the question, I attended the Kamal Trinity board meeting last night. It was held up in Bulverde. And this issue of how much water is there, when are we overusing it, clearly around the Canyon Lake region, I think it's called the Texas Water Company, they have stopped approval of 9 developments up there. And those, I believe, are those, they draw water directly from the lake. During the presentation last night, the Guadalupe River you would expect to be gushing, and there's apparently a lot of water in it, but there is a characteristic of the Guadalupe River that about 2 miles before it gets to Canyon Lake, it disappears under the ground. And the local universities, I mean, quite an impressive staff of academics using tracers, maybe even dye and monitoring local wells, are really trying to look and see what is going on with our water. Because, and today I went into some of the Texas, I should have written it down, but it's the overarching Texas state well reporting system. And if you tap in and look at the various wells in the area, some are up long-term, some are dead even for the last 50 years, and some are down. Anecdotally, the springs that populated the western part of Comal County are not springing like they used to. Some of these Kamal Trinity people are farmers from that area. I tell you, I think there's really a lot of questions as to just how much water is out there, and because there's increased from some prior meetings. The state is mandating ever more exotic modeling, which is taking advantage of increased computing power to try and model across the whole state this aquifer, as to paint a picture of just how much water is there under the ground. I mean, this isn't helpful or in some ways relevant, but I just wanted to share with you, I've been trying to probe and sort of find that out because the Trinity is quote unquote an unregulated aquifer. Putting wells into it is regulated. You have to follow certain casing procedures. So it's not the Wild West, but the pumping, there is no pumping limitations per se. They know how much is being extracted because non-exempt wells, which are commercial wells, have to report monthly. Exempt wells, which would be a private well, which is a very small percentage of the water withdrawal, is not reported. So they know how much is coming out, but what its actual impact is it's difficult. So sorry if I ran on, but I just wanted to share that. I've been trying to get my fingers around that myself. Any other questions for Hank or Ryan in regards to this?
I have a couple,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. And I guess it's for Hank, because I know Tri-Hydro's been working on this for a long time, but I'm not sure how long it's been in your lap. But in 2016, 2017 timeframe, there was an effort to restart the water master plan. And at that time, they'd done a lot of modeling on the distribution system and the minimum flows and all that information was kind of there. And then it kind of got put on pause. So can you clarify, are we restarting, or where are we actually at in terms of a timeline of getting the infrastructure plan complete?
So we have all that information still. We're using that as a basis. Basically, we're unpausing. Let's put it that way. So we have the existing model. We have conditions from, I believe, 2018 in there. So it's a great starting point. It's really allowing to forward think from that point. So we have that list as well, and we will be basically modifying that to today's needs.
Okay, and with the look at stuff along 2252, has that changed any of the assumptions that go in there as far as the maximum pressure differentials and the flow rate requirements, any of that stuff. Is our current distribution system, that model, still aligned with the 2252 development, or is that something that has to be relooked at?
I think that the assumptions would be relatively the same. We're still looking for development through that area for both, quite frankly, water and sewer long-term. And so we will take a look at those assumptions again, but I don't know if they're necessarily going to change from a land usage perspective. We make gallons per minute or usage assumptions based on the zoning that we currently have. And so as long as that's aligned with the most recent comprehensive plan, then that's what we're going to lean towards when we model it out.
Okay, thank you. Also, and I apologize because it's been long enough, I don't remember the numbers, but there were 1 or 2, maybe at most 3 homes in Garden Ridge that did not meet the minimum pressure requirement. If we're looking at redoing any of the storage, is there anything in the plan that's being considered to address that?
There definitely is. We've discussed about looking at the different pressure planes, but particularly looking at those low pressure areas. Not just low pressure, but high pressure. There's some areas of town that are at 110 PSI. So that's part of this valve effort, is to look into what can we do to help those residents out. But I am aware of some of the higher points in town having lower pressure. So that may not necessarily be in the next 5 years. But how we plug that in and prioritize it, it'll definitely be looked at. There might be something I've tossed around is maybe we have a smaller elevated somewhere just to help in those areas. But again, we'll have a full team take a look at that and make some recommendations.
Okay, I appreciate that. And still, there's no thought of additional, there's only going to be one elevation plane that we're going to use. We're not talking about any kind of lift stations or anything like that in the plan, or is that still unknown?
That would be unknown. It would be a function of what makes the most sense for where the low pressure areas are, and cost too, of course.
Okay, so I ask all that just to get to the last question, which is sort of what's the timeline? I mean, when in the cycle would we expect to have a draft or updated or what? When would we be processing through looking at an infrastructure plan?
Yes, I believe the original timeline was 3 to 6 months is what we agreed to. So it really depends on how quickly we can get through it, and we spend a lot of time on the back end with review. So, putting 4 or 5 people's thoughts on it before we present, as well as going with stakeholders in the community. So we can arrange that however Ryan and Steven or you guys see fit. So it'll be a back and forth when we get to that stage.
I would say hopefully in less than 4 or 5 months. My goal would bring back to the Water Commission for review in some draft form for any comments moving forward, ultimately to be approved by City Council from that standpoint. But I think by having this in place, next year when you're considering any rate, you have sort of that basis to help develop that rate structure because you already know what's coming down the pipeline as far as costs.
And I guess I don't know if there'll be a follow-up. I got one, big picture question for you, and I'm trying to figure exactly how I want to word it. But there were several of the things in the letter about projects, like here's something the next 3 years or next 4 years, and we've been having things in the water rate structures. I've been having to work on it for 6 years now, and there's always been a need for, hey, there's something the next 3 years. So the original decision was to remove the water fund out of the general fund and to create a separate, supposedly self-sustaining water company. However, there's been several instances in the last couple of years where, the council has taken money out of the general fund to support water and vice versa, and that's not been part of we've not had visibility on any of that, not that we should. But I guess my question gets to, with all these things that are coming up, is that still the right answer? I mean, for the city this size, is it still right to continue to try to run it separately, or are you considering or thinking about maybe that needs to be reexamined?
Well, I think anything's on the table and reviewing that process. Previous city I worked for was sort of an enterprise fund, you know, so borrowed against it for borrowing, for doing capital projects, buying equipment for a wastewater treatment plant, those kind of things. So those things are on the table to be evaluated and looked at from that standpoint. So I definitely would work with Hank as our engineer to engage the Water Commission moving forward on any level from that standpoint, to make sure that we had y'all's input moving forward, that you've blessed a plan like this. And then, of course, re-examining if it's necessary to be sort of standalone or incorporated in that. You know, a big part of that, and we'll get to that as the chairman will talk about, is that debt obligation. Because there's debt obligation that exists already, and then we know there's compounding debt to the water fund. So the idea is trying to tackle that debt to pay back the general fund at some point.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
If there's, welcome, Mayor. Good evening. If there's no further questions on that, I think we're going to move on, and I'm going to make a suggestion, and that is we're going to move item C, which is the recommendation on the water rate structure next, and then we'll discuss the drought management revisions toward the end. Robin has prepared a recommendation for the commission's decision, and I guess we'll ask Ryan if you would give us an overview of that. Robin was not able to join us tonight.
Yeah, she was actually out, and so vacation, I believe. So, but from my standpoint, you know, she obviously engaged myself on this, talked thoroughly, and input from Stephen, Hank, our engineer, to come up with sort of the recommendation here. Obviously, I know Robin presented to y'all, did a great job, you know, talking about consumption, current rates, the analysis, survey of other entities related to water service and their providers, which has laid out options for, you know, a potential proposed rate increase. Her memo details the critical reasons for those necessary adjustments. As we mentioned, moving forward, we should have the CIP presented to the Water Commission and then City Council in the next few months. But I think right now, in talking to Robin as well, that $3 increase goes towards the debt obligation. So, which roughly equates to an additional, and I think Chairman Pohl, you asked me that yesterday, it's roughly an additional $64,000 towards the debt obligation with that $3 increase. And so, you know, this sort of comprises the thoughts from staff. Being here on the ground for 90 days, I'm trying to get my arms around it as well, because it seems like coming up with this recommendation, which again is just an option. The commission has options 1 through 5 to choose from. We're just trying to give you an outlook based on future projects and the current debt from that standpoint.
Thank you. There probably will be a couple of
Sure.
question, discussion back and forth, but I'll turn it over to the commission for any preliminary questions at this point.
And
I've
I
got-
would also like to say that, you know, and I'm not sure what has happened in the past, but the timeline for discussing a rate increase generally sort of needed to happen now, because we're going to start the proposed budget. So we need to be able to forecast the revenue, look at the entire proposed budget as we move forward to make sure whatever rate is set upon, that it starts and aligned with the October 1st adopted budget moving forward. So I just want to give you the reasons, sort of our timeline from that standpoint, and myself and the council will be working on the proposed budget over the next 2 months. And so having an idea of a certain rate will give us a better idea to forecast that revenue and project, you know, for any expenditures, not only in water, but on the general fund side as well. So.
Thank you. I've only been through one budget cycle myself, but the general feeling was last year when we did it, we had to make the decision relatively quickly, and there was a feeling that we didn't have sort of the backup information. In other words, are the expenses that are in for next year really recognized? I think it's a little bit different this time, but that's maybe a sort of a general feeling that I think the commission had coming out of
Well,
last year.
And again, part of having a sort of basis next year for any type of rate study or evaluation or determination of a proposed rate next year is that you will have all the information you need related to future projects, and also looking at possibly how the rate modeling is done to better allow you all to choose an option, especially related to operations next year as well. And by no means, we could start that process even earlier if it gives the commission, if it's helpful to the commission from that standpoint.
Okay, thank you. To the commission now. Questions, discussion?
So I'm looking at the options here. In the expenditures, that is the exhaustive list that we know of. So I just see ground tank and valves, but you listed a whole lot of other things. So are we gonna start acquiring funds now for that, or are we not even gonna think about putting it into the budget until 5, 10 years, whatever?
Some of those projects I mentioned were in this year's budget, and a
Okay.
few are, I would say, 5 to 10 years out that I mentioned. So the immediate ones would be the valves, the other tank, the FM 2252 tank rehab, and the generator would be those. But again, the focus is on debt repayment as well to clear some room for these other projects coming down the line.
Okay, so for fiscal year 2026, we only expect maintenance-wise ground tanks and valves to be done. There's no other maintenance items for 2026?
The rest will be more reoccurring maintenance items like Stephen mentioned. So you have your SCADA, who needs a little more interchangeable parts in the system, and those pieces are not cheap, unfortunately.
So that's built into the maintenance and operation line item there, the 1.36?
I'd have
Or is
to,
that in addition to that?
I would defer to Stephen for that one.
What he was just describing, the ongoing maintenance, I forgot the acronym he used, is that built into the 1.36 maintenance and operation line, or is this in addition to that?
Just the general maintenance, like the chlorine, that's gonna go up every year, they're gonna increase it probably by 5% every year. Depending on how much we use, say we're out of the drought by 26, so we're gonna be anticipating using a lot more chlorine. Now, when usage is very low, so that's kind of a guess, that's up in the air, that's gonna happen. Want to actually buy some scales we have some aging scales that are chlorine bottles. So that's another expense to do, because we have to keep track of that chlorine down to the last pound, so we know when to change them out, so we don't be, so there's no chlor, so it's not raw water going into the tanks. Reagents, we have, continuous chlorine monitoring system on the Schoenthal plant that we're required to have for per TCEQ. And that's gonna probably run, it's about $1,000 for all the reagents that we have to use on that, because 3 bottles, we have to change
so-
out those 3 bottles every single month now, because that's a newer expense that we have.
So all that stuff, the reoccurring, that's already built into these line items. I'm just trying to make sure that there's nothing we're not thinking of, so we can factor that in. And then, in addition to that, I remember last year, y'all added a head count, I think, to the water team. So is there any anticipation of additional head count that we got to factor into that line item as well, or is that already built in?
No, I think we're not gonna need any more new employees for the water. We're doing pretty good right now. Everything's actually getting caught up with a full staff. Prior years, we've pretty much been on a skeleton crew compared to other cities. So we've actually got a lot done with very little in the past, which is kind of
All right.
also a problem whenever time catches up to things, when you only have a little bit of staff to address everything. So
Yeah.
we're
Cool.
moving in the right direction.
Just want to make sure there's, we get 6 months into the fiscal year and then, oh, we need to do this, or, oh, we need to hire somebody, and then that's another couple $100,000 that we got to account for,
We also have to account for, now that even though we have a sewer system, all of our guys have to get sewer license per TCEQ, even, so whenever we do get hookups for that also, that we have to be ready for that, and any type of ongoing maintenance that's gonna cause, like, even though it's not happening now, we might have to get a sewer jet machine or have a company on standby to unclog sewer lines and stuff, so, or grease traps and
Gotcha.
whatnot. So there's a lot of moving parts that could come into play.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else?
I don't know if you want to listen to me or not. You gotta tell me if you're ready.
I'll give one more opinion, I
Please.
guess, before you take off here. Just kind of looking at the options, looking at just high level of, I'm looking at it on my phone here. I don't know if you can put it on the screen, but my general thought is, you know, I like the idea of having at least 6 months of expenditures as quote-unquote emergency fund. So my gut reaction would go to that. Scroll down just a tad. Yeah, that option, that third one there. So I think it's option 2. That's where I would lean to where we have enough for 6 months of expenditures. We're still increasing, we're still getting additional revenue, and we can still make our debt payment without gouging potentially people right off the bat. So that's kind of where I'm leaning initially.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think the idea too is, you know, trying to look so far ahead to figure out what this rate structure might look like, to make sure that we, you know, obviously cover operations and maintenance and other projects. Again, you know, we're talking about, if nothing is done, that, you know, we come back in 5 years and say, gosh, we're going to need 12, 13, 14%. So we want to try to do this effectively and plan accordingly, especially when you're talking about increasing with rate options.
Just in terms of where this option 4 would place us, Robin pulled down this New Braunfels study and presented it to us, and I readjusted where our current rates put us, and they move us into some different brackets, but we're still at the 6,000 and 12,000 gallon use rate, still in the bottom third, maybe to the middle of the surrounding communities. So we're not out of line in that regard. That is, if you use that base and that tier and apply it to those volumes, those are the exact numbers. So we're not getting out of line in that respect. Just a point of information. Kevin, go ahead.
First of all, I will start by saying this is an extremely difficult project, and I know it's the first year that the staff has tried to get their arms around it. So nothing I'm about to say is meant to be critical of that process. It's done to the best of your ability. But you don't have the information that you think you have. It's not here, because I was here when we put this model together, and it is not an accounting model. There have been multiple decisions made along the way. Let me back up. What the commission was asked to do originally was to take a clear need to raise the rates and provide a rationale to do that. And so a contractor had done the original model, and the council was not happy with that model or their recommendations. So we basically redid it. So, and every year since then, it's been getting a little bit better, but this model comes from the American Water Works Association for small municipalities. And you don't get to change the category. So a lot of, like where you see maintenance operation, those numbers, somebody goes behind the scene and figures out what to put in there, but they're pulling it from last year's budget as best that they can. So a lot of if you get into the city council stuff, you can find their line items, and you can go back and look what was done in the past, but the tool is supposed to be a forecast of the future. And we mix apples and oranges when we do it a little bit. So to look at each specific number and say that number means something beyond the first or second year, you really can't do it, because the number it's based on is all, what did we do last year? So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Second, the commission has never been asked to participate in the budget, ever. So that is all done at the council level. All we've been asked to do is contribute to the rate structure. And I say that because this number that shows 5.3, 5.9, 6.4, those have been the same for the last 5 years. Because every time it gets up to 9 or 10 months, somebody's good idea comes in and takes money out of the fund to go buy something else that we've decided we need. They get done in the course of a year's budgeting, not a plan that's 5 years out. And until we say, no, we're not going to do that anymore, it isn't going to get fixed. So that's why I keep pushing on the water infrastructure plan. It's been over 5 years since we had one, and yet we've done lots of infrastructure updates, and we keep being asked to go back and fix the rates. We've spent too much money, we don't have enough in the reserve fund, it didn't rain enough, we need to raise the rates. So at some point, there's got to be some discipline on the other side of the equation. And that's not been something that we don't, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying we don't know. It hasn't been provided to us. So you can go dig through some of the stuff and find it, but we don't know. And Robin didn't know what this model was based on, so she couldn't have really done anything different. But I just ask you to take it with a grain of salt. It's not fully complete. The debt service obligations that are there have been the same debt service obligations that have been going on there, except for the one that says pay back the general fund. Because again, that's something the council decided to do. Not saying it shouldn't have been done, but that got added. That was not something that was part of any of the rate structure planning we did in the past. So we just need to be a little careful about that, because the goal has been, we've done it in the last couple of years, the goal has been to try to get that reserve fund number between 9 and 12 months. 6 is the statutory minimum that we're supposed to have. But then again, how you define that is somewhat, I mean, that's really at the end of the year for the accounting, right? When it's done at the end, as long as you had 6 months, you were fine. How it projects per month is unknowable. The Nebraska utilities stuff is not based on the same assumptions or comparable things to us. 6,000 and 12,000 gallons is, that use level is not what our customers use. There are some, but the average just household use is around 7,000 gallons a month. But the average customer is 33,000 gallons, at least it was 2 years ago. It's probably changed a little bit. And I say that because it's hard. We don't have the data on how we sell water to really break out our customer classes. So what we have done is we have said the base rate needs to fund the primary infrastructure, and the tier rate was supposed to cover the peak load, because our water system is a peak load problem. It is way bigger than it needs to be for the number of the citizens we have if we just use 7,000 gallons of water. But we have big lots and people use it to irrigate. So the philosophy was we were going to keep the 6,000 and 12,000 gallons low when you look at the other cities, and we were going to try to make that up on the tier. And that was a previous decision the council made quite a while ago. The consequence of doing that, though, is when it doesn't rain much, yes, you have a revenue shortage. I mean, that's what happens. So last rate cycle, you agreed and recommended, and the council approved to raise that base rate and try to stabilize the revenue, and that has been somewhat successful, but we've been in a drought. So there's just a whole lot there that it's hard to pull out what the little things are. So when they provide this to us, what I would have expected as an analysis of alternatives is, here's 2 or 3 choices that will meet the requirement that the council has set. It will provide the rates, it'll provide the long-term budget, and it's just, the difference would be, are we emphasizing the base rate? Are we emphasizing the tier structure? You know, different ways of accomplishing the same thing. What we're presented is, it needs to be option 4 because we've already committed to spending this money. And that may be right, but we have done this every time for the last 6 years. So at some point, we need to set a rate that will be good for a couple of years. You got to check it every year. You do have to check it every year. But I guess where I'm at right now is, I would have rather seen an analysis that says, here's what the base rate needs to be to cover the fundamental part of our water infrastructure that we need. And if that's $5 more, $6 more, that would probably be better than the continued high tier increase. Because every time we do a percent on the tier, it spreads it out at the upper ends, right? And so at some point, that needs to get rebalanced. The other problem we have at historical is our outside city rates are way higher. And every time we've done a tier increase, they've got the same percentage increase as we did inside the city. And so that has diverged. And now they're hardly using any water, which is fine if that's what we want to do. But the reason it was set that way was because before, the water company was funded out of the general fund. And so the taxpayers funded it directly. Now it's funded mostly out of revenues. So why did the folks outside pay that much more than we pay inside? So I just think there's a whole lot more questions on our rate structure than should it be 6% or 4%, and I don't think we've answered that yet. So if we don't have answers and we have to do it by July, then I would rather do the minimum we can get away with until we can come up with a better model and a better plan. Now, I know I'm on my soapbox, and I apologize, so I will get down, but.
So Commissioner, as a response, I would have to say, I can't tell you how the Water Commission was engaged on the budget process in the past. I know I've been in cities where that's not the case. So how we're gonna do the budget this year is gonna be different, and even next year, it's gonna be even more different. So, again, I've worked in a city where the city council reviewed the water budget. So, the Water Commission. So I think there's ways of doing things. There's ways of evaluating, again, looking at if it's in the general fund versus standalone in the water. Those things are options on the table. I think all that can be evaluated. Us bringing forward this option 4 is a staff recommendation at this time what we think. But obviously, it's up to the Water Commission to determine that. You know, we wanted to, instead of giving you 2 options, here's a better scope of what these options look like. And the idea, again, is trying to balance that operations maintenance, but also, again, addressing the debt obligation as well. Robin mentioned that there's 3 bonds related to that from 12, 15, 17 that eventually got to be paid off, the 2252, and then now taking on the Vista Ridge. So, you know, those are obligations we see. So this is trying to encompass those debt obligations as well. And like I mentioned, that $3 is that standalone increase to cover that debt obligation to pay back the general fund as well. So. But I can tell you from my standpoint and working with the mayor and council that the budget process will be different, and it could look different, obviously, how we engage the Water Commission as well.
I have a question on process. So can the rate be changed without the Water Commission recommending a change to the council? So my question
The council makes
lies-
those decisions.
Exactly.
Ours is
So
just a
like,
recommendation.
exactly. So like what, at the end of the day, what power do we have in changing any rate structure? None, really, right?
Correct. The question is, when it goes to the council, are we presenting viable alternatives that give them a meaningful choice? Or has it already been decided and we're just telling them, yeah, we all unanimously agreed because that's what we were given? That's really what it comes down to. We don't have to do anything with it. In fact, 2018, I think, was the first year that we were involved at all. That was all done outside of the commission. My frustration is I don't like being on the rate structure side without having visibility into the other half of the equation. You know, because we're the ones that end up standing out, if there is a citizen outcry, we're the ones that end up standing out there trying to explain to the council in public why it is what it is. You know,
Yeah, like I remember
but
the last
ultimately it's
time.
the council's decision.
I remember the last time we did this review, it was posed to us in a similar way. You know, here's your options, but really we want to see this. So why are we going through the exercise if we're just passing along a recommendation? You know what I mean? Just trying to understand like the real process, like how that's working.
But to clarify, sir, I hate to call you Ryan, but I can't remember your last name. Oh, there, I can see it now. Anyway, the 3% is just debt service. That's what that represents?
Which again equates to roughly, I think Robin mentioned 64,000 above last year's.
Okay, thank you.
Couple of things. The commission is an advisory group. We are an advisory group on every aspect of why we're here. Our job is to use it quickly, to do the heavy lifting, to ask these kinds of questions. Ultimately, I believe, and I'm here because I feel our recommendation carries weight. To be clear, I believe we're still in an inflationary period. When we took our best recommendation last year, which was the first increase in 3 or 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, was during a period of unprecedented inflation. I believe, because I see that myself in my business dealings, that still is existing. I think we need to recognize, there's an analytical process, but we also have to understand the environment that we're in. In my discussions with Ryan, I've expressed concern that we need to have a meaningful pay down of our debt. We don't do anything if we don't pay down debt in our personal lives and in our municipal lives. At 25,000 gallons per month, this is an aggregate 6% increase for a user in Garden Ridge. Is that high? Is it not? Nobody wants to pay it, but it's not out of line when I look at how much I pay for chlorine tablets now for my pool, and I understand how much you're paying for chlorine gas. I've always maintained that I think the environment we're in, we're consistently being surprised by the prices that we're paying for everything. Benefits, salary, consumables. I think we need to apply our judgment to that and make sure that we don't undershoot, so that when some of these other things come along, other capital expenditures, that we're not behind the 8 ball. I place great weight in where we sit relative to other communities, because everybody else is having the same discussion. They have customers that are concerned about rates. So I'm just one member here, but I think it's not an unreasonable proposal. But let's, I don't know if Hank, Ryan, you have anything else that you'd like to add? We'll have a final round of discussions, and I think we should make a decision.
No, I'll just reiterate the point that, this time next year when you're discussing rates, that you obviously have that better foundation as a result of, capital projects prioritized with a cost. So again, you can figure out what year you're going to pay for those and then try to pay down that debt, because more than likely you may have to borrow to do those other bigger projects. So bringing down that debt is important. I think the Water Commission as a whole, if there's goals you have, I know there's a discussion about months in the reserve. Is the goal to get a higher reserve? What is to be accomplished from the Water Commission that y'all would like to do, not only on the budget process, but then on any level that can be communicated to City Council? My goal this fall, after we do the budget, is to have a strategic plan with the entire council for Garden Ridge and figure out what we want to look like 5-10 years from now, and make sure that we have a strategic plan that's driving the budget each year to take care of those things, which includes water.
I just wanted to quickly weigh in and say, from a council perspective, your recommendations do carry a lot of weight. And we look to the Water Commission, to do the heavy listing, as Mr. Pohl said. And, we all take very seriously what you bring to us, at City Council. So just wanted to affirm that. And, also just echo what Ryan has said about the budgeting process. Again, it's gonna look differently next year, as well as, we hope with the strategic planning that we'll have more inputs, so we can better, formulate a budget that takes us into the future, that considers, long-term planning in Garden Ridge. So, look for those two things to definitely happen.
I want to echo something that Kevin said, that we have a system that is sitting there capable of lifting 100 pounds, and most of the time we only have it do 50. But we have to maintain that 100-pound system. And I think going forward into time, I think we're going to be surprised at the expense of the capital improvements that are going to take to keep this aging system going. When we're talking about doing street repair, street replacement, you're hitting every button of inflation at that point. I like the concept that this money is pledged to the debt reduction, because I think we need to set ourselves up for expenditures going in the future. This system is, and Garden Ridge is not getting younger, but yet it needs to have the muscularity to, if we want to preserve the lifestyle, the lot sizes that we are here to enjoy. So at this point, I'll ask again if there's any more discussion, comments from the commission. I would like to ask at this point for a motion of recommendation for option 4. Okay, we did this last year, and I can do this. I make a motion that the Water Commission make a recommendation to the City Council at their next meeting that we adopt option 4 as proposed by the city, which is a 3% base increase to the monthly base rate and a 6% increase to the tiered water consumption rate. May I have a second?
A second.
Discussion.
I think the 6% tier rate increase is too much. I think we have done that repeatedly, and I'm not talking about inflation. A 6% overall might be fine, but I don't agree with doing it on the tier rate at this point, not without more analysis. I think would be better to increase the base rate by an extra $1 than it is to do the tier rate, just because it just seems like we're driving it further and further of depending more revenue on the higher end, and we don't generate it when we're not selling the water, among other things. I don't know that we have numbers to do anything else, but I agree we have to cover the debt service. I agree with that. I just don't know that we have enough information to say that 6% tier rate increase is what we want. We need to look at what the proportionality is of those increases. Like, what do we want for the marginal increase on that curve? That was not presented to us, even though we did it before on every analysis. So I personally can't get behind the 6% increase without more data. So that's where I'm at.
Discussion?
I agree. I think it weighs more on the base versus the tier. I agree. So you raise the tiers on the higher end, and they're just going to use less, and you're not going to make the money you think.
I think raising the tiers was pointed out earlier, raises the rates to people outside the city limits unreasonably without justification. So I agree with Kevin.
Ryan, you have any thoughts?
You know, I mean, there's 5 options, and they're obviously the base and the tier, and sort of without Robin here running those numbers, I can't tell you what one comes out to another. If the goal is the debt, then it could land around the $3 or $4, I think. If you want to lower the tier slightly, that's obviously up to you all from that standpoint. Again, not getting too far behind with this increase, that you'd have a better idea, obviously, next year moving forward with, as Commissioner Harshbarger said, more data from that standpoint. So,
What was the increase last time? I forgot. Was it a
5 to the base. I can't recall what the tier increase was. I think it's in our data someplace.
Oh, she's.
Oh, here it is.
Here you go.
A 5%
$5
base and a 1% tier rate increase.
That was effective on December bill. Okay.
Right. I guess one question would be, if there was no decision made tonight, what impact does that have going forward with you, Ryan?
I guess it does put it behind as far as the process for it to go to council to be sort of approved upon. It'd probably put us behind a month. Again, my goal and timeline is to make sure that the rate is as is once we start with the adopted budget. So we're going to be adopting the budget latter part of August, I think, just the first part of September. So the idea is that we'd have a new rate in there. It gives us a better idea of what the Water Commission is recommending now, so we can use that to forecast from that standpoint. But I'm not sure, again, what has been done in the past. I just know this is the timeline to use because we're going into the proposed / adoption and then have it to make sure the rate is effective October 1st with the new adopted budget. So there is some critical to the timeline for getting this done as well.
If we had a live spreadsheet, we probably could come up with an answer tonight, but that's a challenge.
I'm trying to do mental math, which is always dangerous, but.
Yeah, like what's the debt service? I'm looking at this 3/4 meter is worth $1 per year, or $1 is worth per year, 21,594. What's the debt payment for the year? Can we just divide that by however many dollars we need to increase and get our base rate increase?
I would assume, looking at the $3 base, that equates to about additional 64,000, so roughly 1%, give or take 21,000.
But is that 64,000, that the debt payment that we expect to pay back to the general fund in 2026?
That's upon paying the current debt rate, which would be the 95,000, I believe, that's in there, she's placed, that's owed to the general fund. Because you have your regular debt service for the 3 bonds and then what's owed to the general fund.
Oh, the 95.
She didn't
Okay, I
say
see.
specifically or tell me what that increase does. It just goes towards debt obligation.
So 4.399 gets you the 95. Quick math. So if the goal is to pay the debt service, a $4 increase just about gets you there. Maybe you do a lower percent tier to get the rest.
I think it's a pretty
It's
good
an option.
compromise.
Again, we have I'm not trying to speak out of turn, Mr. Chair, but there is a motion on the table, so we have the discussion, but we'll still have to act on that. But looking at the percentages, as Commissioner Dorsey was saying, if you go up $1 on the rate, it's roughly offset by a 1% reduction in the tier, roughly. So,
That's
Yeah,
where I was.
so
that's
$4
where I was
and
gonna-
1% gets us 100,000. 633.
so I guess what I'm getting at is if we decide not to go forward with the recommendation that's there, we could always look at doing a combination between 3 and 4 where we use maybe a $4 base and then 4% or 5%, and then part of that recommendation would be, lower would be better. I'm just trying to offset them so we don't, so we, pay homage here and be faithful to the work the staff has done. Just try to offset those two a little bit. And then the staff could rerun that number when they present it to council. So council would then be able to look at 4 and 5 and then make their own decisions. That would be my recommendation going forward. Instead of going 3 versus 4, you're sort of combining 2 and 4, but you're increasing. Instead of $2 increase, you go to $4, right? So that would then offset 2 on the tier there, but that would let you come down 2 from the 6%. So you could do like $4 and 4%, should be roughly the same. It still gets you above 6 months on reserves. But you wouldn't know for sure until they run the numbers again. So I'm just suggesting they could present both, right? They're going to present alternatives to council. They don't have to have here's just one choice.
In terms of a recommendation, then I'd like to withdraw the motion that I made, and I'd like to re-enter a new motion as long as I was the one that was speaking, and that is that we propose a $4 base increase and a 4% tier as a recommendation to the city council in the next meeting. May I have a second?
First, can I have Commissioner Stone also withdraw his previous motion?
I withdraw.
Thank you.
There's a motion out there. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Not sure right now what we're discussing. What was the motion?
This is a motion to recommend to the city council an increase in the base rate for next year's budget of $4 with a 4% tier increase.
Okay, I mean, with the caveat that the staff will rerun those numbers and make sure they're still comparable.
Side by side of what was originally recommended to y'all and then what y'all proposed.
I mean, I think that's livable. I would just add for everybody, the negative on that is, again, it makes our rate structure more stable, but it puts more of the burden on the lower ratepayers, lower tier ratepayers. The justification for that is the inflationary environment that we're in, that just raises it for everybody equally instead of changing the marginal increases. That would be my explanation anyway.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for all your work and good thoughts. Then, moving on, then the next item, this is getting back to the agenda. Ordinance 61, and we can combine discussion and review of 159 at the same point because they are strongly related to each other. My thoughts are review and comment. As we've done in the past, if you have written comments, I'd be glad to take them. I hope we're getting down to the end. I'd like whatever changes I make this time, I'd like them to be the last, and then with the goal of presenting it to the city council so that, again, the goal is to have this in place and working when we open this Appendix B watering window, so to speak, which would be in the fall. So at this point, I'd like to entertain any discussions or comments. You all have had this in front of you. I sent you back your prior comments so that you could at least compare them to what I've made. And I think I tried to go through each one of them and faithfully add things unless I didn't agree, in which case you can see it in the text.
On page 6, they have for your temporary users, you have 100,000 gallons. Where did that number come from? Is that something that, is that for, I know it's not swimming pools, but my question is for some building project, would that be enough for them? Would that come back, ask for more, which they wouldn't be able to, or they just, I'm wondering where the number came from.
The clause allowing this is in the current ordinance. One of the early comments was to put an amount on that, an unlimited amount. Quite honestly, I used my judgment and experience in construction as 100,000 gallons. Again, anything beyond that it can be subject to variance. I'm open to that, Stephen. You might have a better window on people who, these are not normal metered people, but a construction company comes in, wants a tap to do some work, whether that's a reasonable, livable number for you.
I'd drop it probably at about 40 or 50,000.
Okay. And this is with your, as it's written, it's with your approval. I can't get to the, what page is that on?
Page 6.
Okay, sorry.
A lot of the times they come in with, if it says a hydrant meter, they'll come in with a 1,500 gallon tank truck and
Okay.
do several tanks. So I'd, like I said, maybe 40, 50,000.
Okay, like I said, 100,000 was just my best estimate.
I just wondered where the number
Okay,
came from.
all right. while you're looking at this, I'll cover a couple things that were raised in the last meeting, and I put them in the email that I sent out. There was a question, both in ordinance 159 and 161, about the approximately 13,000 square foot limit. I did some research. Was there any history into this? There is no history. It turns out 13,000 square feet, and I think Kevin scratched these numbers out, is roughly 40% of a 3/4 acre lot. So if you take the footprint of the home and typical hardscaping, that's a fair amount of square footage that is allotted or available for irrigation. I left it in there because somebody who has a very large property, I don't think it's consistent with our drought management philosophy and usage of water to say, if you got 5 acres, you can irrigate all of it and make it look like a golf course. So for that reason, I left the 3,000 square feet in. And then also in stage 3, that I believe in Appendix B, that's reduced by 50% to 6,500 square feet. I felt that was consistent with the fact that you're in stage 3, and although there's you're in that watering window for new landscaping, I don't think it makes sense to be doing the full square footage. So agree, disagree. I didn't make many changes to that, if at all, and I know there were some questions from the last time. Further on ordinance 159, I changed the turf requirement. Previously, it said if you're only replacing half or less of your turf, you could use whatever species you had in before. I changed it to if you're replacing any turf, it has to be one of the drought-resistant varieties that are listed in 159. And if you look at that, that's about all you're going to find at Millburgers or anybody these days. Nobody is selling anything that isn't drought-resistant. So I clarified that. And I made some changes to the swimming pool filling criteria in the upper stages 3 through 5. I obtained from SAWS this requirement for putting good soil under any new turf grass. There was a question about where'd that come from. In talking to other cities, they really struggle with this. They found developers were scalping the land, throwing turf on, and in 6 months, the new homeowner had a dead lawn. And I know from experience, because I redid my lawn with very little water. But there was a question, where did that come from? I lifted the paragraph from SAWS. I figured they had the ability to do a lot more heavy lifting than I could, and it's consistent with a major water, utility. Anyway, those are the ones that I put out for you. Other questions or comments?